Hello and welcome to Smitty's. I am a wood cutting fanatic who loves to run a chainsaw. I run alcohol chainsaws, ported chainsaws, I race chainsaws, and I even run the occasional vintage. Now remember, I cannot do this without you. You're everything to the channel, so please remember, subscribe, give that thumbs up, leave that comment. Today, we are going to have a lot of fun. So how you doing? Hey, so they just released the new classes and stuff for Solfest. So we're gonna kind of go over it because there's been some changes. In fact, there's been enough changes that a lot of guys are gonna get knocked out of things, and some, you know what I mean. So like their saws are too big, so they're gonna get knocked out, and that's gonna happen to me too. So there's some changes here. They just got announced today, so we're gonna have to change up some game plan here and kind of in order to move forward. So I'm going to kind of go over everything with you, and we'll kind of figure out a game plan of what we need to do. Alrighty. So it's going to start out with the smaller saws, the 50cc guys. So the cutoff point for that is actually 50.2 cc's. I believe last year it was like 55. So there's a lot of them saws that you know, in that 50 to 55 range, they're getting knocked out. They're not going to be able to run this year. So, you know, the cutoff point is now 50.2 cc. And the 50 that we built is within that category. It actually is 49 cc, so we're good to go. It's actually sitting in front of me. But, yeah, we're good to go. And, you know, we don't really have to worry about anything on that class. The next one up is 66 cc. They actually raised that one just a smidge. I believe last year the cutoff was 65 cc. Well, it's 66 cc this year, probably to include a couple of saws that I'm not familiar with, and you know, make it to where those guys can run. But this is the part that kind of sucks. So once you get past 66 cc, you have to race against everybody all the way up to 82 cc. Now, last year that was 85 cc. This year it's going to be 82 cc. So everything from say 66.1 cc all the way up to 82.0 cc is all got to run in the same class. Now that's going to affect me. That's because we built a 385 and now it's too big. It does, you know, knock that saw out from being able to run in that class. I was hoping it was going to continue with the 85cc, but it is not. So we're going to make some changes on that. That's because the next class up is 100.0cc. And I don't think they had that class. I don't think I've ever seen them run that class. So there's now a 100.0cc class. So I have the option of actually moving the 385 up to that class, or I could just leave it as is and run it in that class or something. You know, I could put another top end on it, go as big bore as I wanted to, and just run it in that class, or I could just leave it as is. So, you know, got some decisions to make there. I may just leave it as is and run it in that class. I may go with a bigger top end and put it in that class. I may pick a different saw altogether to run in that class. I do not know. So for now, the 385 is going to continue as planned. I'm just going to go through, change the bearings, make a few tweaks, and go from there. But I do have to decide, though, if I want to throw another top end on it. If I threw another top end on it, I could go bigger in displacement and, you know, make it a little bit closer to the 100cc range, and, you know, run it in that class, you know, with that. The 385, I really had no plans with this saw other than running it at Solfest. So I could go ahead with the bigger top end, but we'll see. This is a 390 top end. I could just throw this on. Well, I need a piston. I got the cylinder. I mean, whenever I pull the saw down to bearings, I may just do that. I might just port up this 390 cylinder, throw a new piston in it, and, you know, go with that. And then throw the 385 cylinder up on the shelf. That's a possibility. So I got to make some decisions before I tear into that. Lots of different options. Now the next thing to mention is the clone saws. So there's 3 clone saws being ran. There's the 372 clone, a 660 clone, and the MS 361 clone. So the 372 and the 660 clones, they basically need to stay stock bore strokes, stock stuff, and board them up and make them run as good as you can. Pretty simple. The 361 clone though, that one's different. You're allowed to go a lot crazier with those modifications. You got to still keep pretty much the same piston and cylinder, but you're allowed to actually build custom heads for those saws. And you're allowed to run them on pretty much any alternative fuel you want to do, and so forth. You're just not allowed to put expansion chambers on them. They still have to keep their regular mufflers like all the other classes. So it's kind of like what would you call a sleeper build? You know what I mean? You build it as hot and crazy and wild as you want, as long as it physically appears to be pretty much stock. So, you know what I mean? It'll be interesting to see what comes out of those 361 clones. You're allowed to run your velocity stacks and air filters and stuff. That stuff is permitted, but other than that, they still have to stay pretty much stock looking. Now, the other things to mention here are there's still the Wild Thing going to be this year. You're pretty much allowed to do whatever you want with the Wild Thing. I have the Wild Thing that we ran last year, and we're going to do that same saw again this year, except this time I'm going to go a little hotter on it. I'm going to throw some alternative fuels to it with the expansion chamber and everything, and we'll see if we can get a little bit more performance out of it for this year. It's going to be pretty simple, or it shouldn't be too hard, I should say. We're going to take the carburetor out of it, put in a different carburetor, modify it, probably going to run it on methanol, and might even throw some additives in there to make it even hotter. We'll see. But yeah, we're going to take the Wild Thing one step further. There's also going to be a class for the Pullin 2, I think it's a 295. I may not run that one. I think I have one sitting right there on the shelf. It's the Homelight version of that. As long as it's based on that platform. It don't have to be the exact Pullin, just as long as it's based off of that Pullin platform. I think it got a Homelight up there on that platform, but I don't think I'm going. I don't know. We'll see. I doubt I enter that class, but we'll see as time goes. And then here's an interesting one. They're going to do a vintage saw, like a vintage bounty log. So they're going to put a log up, and all the vintage saws can go race on. Your saw has to be built, I think, pre-1985, if I remember correctly, and you get to go up and basically make a time cut and see, how your vintage saws do. And I already got one ready to go. We got the P70. It qualifies for that class, so we'll be able to run the P70 on the vintage bounty log and see how it does. It's a pretty cool saw right there, that P70. So we haven't seen it in a while. Maybe we'll fire it up again here soon and make some cuts with it so you guys can see it. And then there's going to be one other competition after that, and then that's what they call a disc stack. Basically, imagine a log standing straight up and down where you got to cut discs off of it. Well, you don't want the disc to fall off the log. You want it to stay there. And basically, in the end, you end up with a whole stack of discs going the whole way down, and whoever gets the most discs in the end wins. Pretty simple. It's all about high RPM, making sure you run the right chain and all that stuff. You don't typically want to run your full chisel chains on them. Your semi chisels are better. It's the side profile of the chain. You know what I mean? You don't want that tooth to be real super wide and sticking out, because it'll catch that disc and make it fling. You want that tooth profile to be as small as possible with a lot of RPM to get through it and not grab the wood off the side of the tooth. And it's pretty simple setup for the disc stack. But that's how, but those are the changes for this year's competition, and it should be interesting. Now, as far as, the 385, it probably just going to run it in the 100cc class, but I don't have anything to run in the 82cc class. So the closest thing I have here is this white Holtz Forma 372 that I put the big bore top end on. That's probably the closest thing I have here, so we might end up just building it and running it in that class. You never know. We'll see. I could end up getting something else, something closer to 80cc. But yeah, pretty simple. It's probably the route we're going to go, though. It's probably going to be that 372. We'll see. I thought you guys would enjoy some of the changes in the rules. Going to make things interesting this year. And, some saws got knocked out. Some saws got brought in. Like, for example, the 66cc, if they would have taken that and made that 66.8 cc or something like that, I think that's what it is, then that would include the MS400. So it's that close to include something like the MS400, but it's also that close to knock out some other saws or to bring in some other saws. You know what I mean? So, should be interesting to see what shows up this year, and, kind of looking forward to it. So anyway, I thought you guys would like a little update on how some of the changes that are happening this year at Solfest. And hey, we'll catch you on the next one. Later.